Welcome to the very first episode of Critical Mass, the show that criticizes the critics. I'm your host, David Lee. With the internet, there is a growing amount of common critiques circulating out there like a virus. Someone hears something that they think sounds smart, and then they decide to regurgitate it all over Facebook or Twitter or in conversations with friends, hoping to be viewed as intelligent by proxy. And if this happens enough times, then people start treating the critique as if it was invariably true. Now, that is definitely a problem, but this is where this show comes in. The purpose of Critical Mass is to examine some of these criticisms that get thrown around and see if they belong in the public consciousness. Because just remember, opinions, even mine, are just that. Regardless to how passionate you are about an opinion, it can never be provable fact. The greatest or worst ever, something being better than something else, and something being over or underrated are not empirical truths, no matter who or how many people think that they are. And therefore, all opinions should not be treated as such. And yes, I am totally aware that this show itself can be viewed as adding fuel to the fire that is over-criticizing. But, to quote the Boondock Saints, this is a lesser form of filth, and I just think that with all the armchair critics that are floating around out there, critiques themselves shouldn't be immune to deconstruction, thus making this more like fighting fire with fire instead. So with that out the way, let's get on with the episode. Today's topic is death in the MCU. Now, it has been some time, but warning, spoilers for Avengers Infinity War are ahead. With the ending of Avengers Infinity War, it seemed like half of the MCU roster had been killed off. Now, this might be addressing the common complaint among many filmgoers that nobody ever dies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or that not enough people die in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And the logic behind why this is a complaint is that events should have consequences, and without paying the ultimate price, nothing seems as important and instead comes off as making things too juvenile. But does this hold any weight? Well, as far as I'm concerned, no. And I think so for several reasons. First, while life and death are very important in the real world, when it comes to fiction, all things are relative. Just look at DC. Superman killed Zod in Man of Steel and people started losing their minds. Iron Man killed a ton of generic bad guys and several big baddies, and yet no one cared. Beyond that, look at Smallville. Green Arrow became suicidal after killing off Lex Luthor, but yet Captain America can mow down Hydra agents with guns like it was Contra, and yet people still view him as squeaky clean. Death is treated differently in different fictional works, and as such, it holds different weight. The decision to take a life in DC is just a bigger deal for heroes in general than it is in Marvel, a company that, need I remind you, has Wolverine, Black Widow, and the Punisher all listed as good guys. So even if the MCU did kill, it won't have the same effect because we've been desensitized to it in Marvel. Which brings me to my second point. People who complain that the MCU never kills anyone are just completely wrong. There have been a lot of deaths in the MCU. As mentioned before, Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor have all slaughtered a litany of soldiers and anonymous henchmen without batting an eye, and this has been going on ever since the MCU's inception. But I understand, this complaint is about bigger named characters. Well, then allow me to remind you of all the villains that have been dispatched over the years. Ironmonger, Whiplash, Malekith, King Laufey, Crossbones, and so on. Now, this practice has contributed to complaints that the MCU has no good villains, but that's another episode. And fine, if that's still not enough for you, if you want some good guys, well, okay, how about Quicksilver, Queen Frigga, Jensen, Erskine, the Ancient One, Garthan Sol, Yondu, and so on. There have been many players of all different kinds to bite the dust, so to those who say that no one ever dies in the MCU, you're just flat out wrong. And that doesn't even count all of the characters that at one point or another appeared to have died only to come back, such as Agent Coulson, the Red Skull, Bucky, and more. And that only furthers my earlier point. When we look at Marvel's Netflix side, characters die and come back, which makes it meaningless. And while DC is stricter with their heroes killing, the show Gotham has also made death nearly inconsequential with their ability to bring people back to life. And finally, that brings me to my last argument. What about consequences? Well, as all these deaths, including the fake ones, prove, just killing off characters doesn't give consequences, and nor does it even equal smart writing. Because even if a movie death turns out to be a fake, it still temporarily has the same impact of a death that sticks. And what is that impact? Well, to be fair, death is sometimes used as a cheap way out to give closure to a story when a writer just has no idea how else to wrap things up, which I think doesn't really add to the film. And also, there are some people that say that death reminds the audience that characters can die, and that the threat of death is necessary to make a movie compelling. To that I say, people don't need reminders that life has stakes. Everybody knows that. And you don't necessarily need to kill people in order to have suspense or importance in a scene. Is it important to have something on the line? Yes, absolutely. It does make us care more when we know that something can go wrong. But do we need that thing to be the imminent threat of death just to make a movie good? No. Killing characters off and the threat of death doesn't in and of itself make a film better. It's just the lowest common denominator. Lasting stakes and permanent changes as a result of those events in a franchise are definitely good things, but death is not always the answer, even though it might be the simplest one.